When did you do the TED Talk, actually?
Oh, when was that?
Was that a couple of years ago?
2017.
Oh, 2017.
Summer 2017.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think he came across your content, and it was in relations to you talking about your book and your journey battling cancer and so forth. And he passed it on to me, and it took me a while for me to actually get into it and actually have a look at it, because I get so much content from my way now. Now I'm in the podcasting world as such, so it's doing the administration and going through them. But when I did eventually get the time to go through yours, one thing I found that even though I haven't gone through cancer myself, but I've had so many relatives that have gone through the whole process of cancer and the pain of finding out that they've been given this death sentence, as some would like to call it. I found it really inspirational, and what inspired me the most was your strength of character and your mindset, and how you decided that you weren't going to let cancer defeat you, but it was a change of mind and the strength that you had to take it head on, in essence. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to invite you, and hence why you're here today. But with all of that said, I kind of did not almost invite you here, because as I was scouring through your content, as we discussed earlier, I found out that you're a Spurs fan.
Oh yes. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs. So the moment I found out you're a Spurs fan, I was like, gosh, another Spurs fan in my house. But yeah, welcome, Mo. It's a pleasure to have you on today. So,
it's an honor to be here.
Yeah. I mean, just to hit the ground straight running, can you just tell us what it's like finding out that you got cancer?
Well, so it was December 2014.
Yeah.
I was told it was cancer. And if I take myself back into that room, my sister came with me. There was a doctor and a nurse.
Yeah.
And everything kind of just stopped. I heard it was cancer. And I just wanted to initially, get as much information from the doctor as possible. Yet while he was telling me, something inside me said, all my previous 10 years, which we'll come on to, of personal development, is preparing me for the biggest challenge of my life. I didn't quite know what the challenge was at that moment, but it slowly started to sink in. I remember leaving the hospital thinking, whatever is ahead of me, I can do. But then found myself in tears. I didn't want to say anything to my sister. We just randomly walked up the high street where the hospital is. And then, as the days and weeks went by, when I learned the severity of my cancer, because at that point I didn't know how bad it was, because I hadn't met the oncologist.
So at that point they haven't told you what stage you were in? Okay.
I was just told it's cancer, and that they will need to meet with the oncology team to decide what the best way forward was. And I met the oncologist a week later, where he told me, you have a week to do as much Googling as possible to learn. And
Google always pulls up the worst case scenarios, I
had two questions: what stage, what grade? And the oncologist said, it's stage 4. You have a small chance of success.
Wow.
I was 31 at the time, and I was shattered. They said the tumor was too big to operate. And so they were going to just put me on chemotherapy straight away.
Oh, wow.
And he got the consent forms to sign me up for that. And I remember thinking, what is the point of even having any treatment? I was shattered. I was devastated.
So at that moment, you kind of given up, assuming that there's nothing that can be done.
Well, I mean, it was a lot of information. It was overwhelming to take. In that point of signing the consent, it was like, what is the point? If I've got a small chance, why do I even go through chemo? But within that same day, I went to meet a friend of mine who is an integrative physician, which basically he's like a mind-body doctor. So he was a trained medical doctor, but his focus is on the mind, the emotions, the nutritional food, all that kind of stuff. So I went to see him, and he was already in my network before, Dr. Kim Jobst.
Yeah.
And I said to him how bad the diagnosis was, and then he reminded me of my previous communication with him, which was around the idea of, will I choose to stay? I connected certain dots back to previous things I heard.
Yeah.
I was in a talk one time, in a lecture, and someone asked, it was a spiritual conversation, and someone asked why their mother had died of cancer. And the author just asked a question, because they had went to see a spiritual healer who had healed them, who'd healed other people of cancer, but why it didn't work for their mother. And so the author, she just asked, did your mother choose to go? Did she?
Wow.
And so in that moment, I remembered asking Dr. Kim, will I choose to stay? And he reminded me of that. And he said, it's the words of one doctor. Your mind is more powerful than the words of one doctor. And that was kind of like the focus for my diagnosis going forward. It was, what does this mean? And will I choose to stay? So I kept asking myself those two questions almost every single day.
But were you a holistic person before then, or a spiritual person?
Yeah.
Okay, so you always had that sense of motivation and the power of the mind before finding out that you had cancer, or did that just develop?
No, that was there from about, when I was 21, 22.
Yeah.
I kind of stumbled into that world. I call it personal development.
Yeah.
Some people call it self-help.
Yeah.
But all of that is basically building my psychology in terms of, work situations. When something goes wrong, my focus would be, okay, so what can I do about it?
Yeah.
Who can I call? What questions can I ask? And that would get me into a proactive, I can do this attitude. And so when cancer came along, I'd already had 10 years of doing that on a day-to-day basis for other kind of issues, not on a health issue, but I was able to just go back to that mindset.
Yeah. It's amazing the power of the mind, and how what we decide to do with it has an effect on our body physically as well. Yeah, because I've read loads of I've read loads of articles before, how people's mindsets and how they believe in that. And so let's say, for instance, there was an individual whose article I was reading, and this person had an illness, and they refused to believe that this illness would overcome them. So they overcame the illness, and their mindset, the positive energy that they sent through their body, helped heal them. And it's just amazing, you telling your story in relations to how you chose to stay. You chose not to be defeated by the cancer, has an impact on your journey currently. So what do you think the link is between the mind and the body?
Huge link. It's all connected. You've probably heard the saying, mind over matter. But I think it's difficult, because my first year of living with cancer was brutal.
Yeah.
I had chemotherapy, I had surgery, and then I had more chemo. But the cancer kept growing.
Yeah.
And so I was doing everything I could possibly do myself in terms of mindset. So all of a sudden, after cancer, my whole life changed. Whereas previously I'd wake up, get ready for work, go to work, have a project to work on with a team of people like my staff. Now it was just waking up, and if I had the energy, go to the hospital and just going through day after day, because the chemotherapy was horrible. I reacted really badly to it in terms of fatigue and weight loss and tiredness, and so it was mind using the psychology to get through each day. It was literally one day at a time.
Yeah.
So I had to build a new set of routine, and so every day would be whatever exercises I could do.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have the energy to go for a run and not even go for a walk. So it was like, what can I do? And if that was just rolling my shoulders or stretching or some gentle yoga postures, if it's breathing exercises, you know, I'd do that for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Sometimes it was just brushing my teeth. Felt like an achievement for that particular day. And then I would listen to some uplifting audio clips of one of the personal development people that I've listened to previously, and I'd then read medical journals or books, and so kind of like educate myself in terms of the healing mechanisms of the body, how the cells work. And so that's how I was feeling my day to day. And then in a good week, I'd be able to go out for a walk and just meet up with a friend in a coffee shop. And so it was using my mind for like daily practical stuff.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. But so before cancer, who was Mo? Like, what was you like? What was your life like? I mean, what was some of the stuff you used to do that cancer completely eradicated from your life?
So going to the gym or going for a run, that was something I'd always look forward to because I loved running. Spending time with my family, work, friends, and all of a sudden I can't go for a run anymore. And I still can't go for a run. And I think that's like the biggest. And then the other stuff, you know, I've always been a Spurs fan. So
these are the beef stuffs.
So, you know, it's weird. I remember 2014 saying this is the worst Tottenham team I've ever seen because we didn't have any stars in there. And then
it was after Bell had left.
After Bell had left, Harry Kane, I'm like, who's Harry Kane? Soldado was a failed £30 million signing. But, you know, even though with cancer, my love of football was still there. It was one of those things. I'd be on my couch with Sky Sports News on, listening to everything about football and sports. And so I love sports. And so I started to go back and watching wrestling again. You know, I grew up watching wrestling and now I've got nothing to do and I'm watching wrestling. And so although I couldn't go out and be physically active, I could sit at home and absorb as much of that as possible.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So what were some of the things you would say you miss from post-cancer? Pre-cancer?
I think the case of just being able to just get up and do whatever I want.
Yeah.
I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Everything has to be planned or have a level of risk assessment to it.
Yeah.
So previously, if I wanted to go out for a walk or a run or just to meet up with someone, I could do that. Now it's a case of scheduling that in and on the day be ready to cancel. So, you know, even like today, for example, you could have got a message from me saying, look, sorry, I can't make it.
Yeah, today's not one of those days,
I think that's the biggest thing I miss, just that level of flexibility to just be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want.
Oh, okay, amazing. So talk me through a bit about, because you went through an interesting treatment process. So you started a conventional NHS chemo treatment and then you diverted into something else, didn't you? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I had a year of NHS treatment, 18 cycles of chemo surgery, but the cancer kept growing.
Yeah.
And so a year later, December 2015, my same oncologist said, there's nothing else we can do for you. The cancer's growing.
And that's how they say it to you directly. There's nothing else we can do.
Well,
or in other words,
I went in, I sat down, and he said it's bad news.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay. He He said, it's bad news, assuming I didn't hear.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. He said, it's bad news 3 times.
Well,
And I'm like,
I get it.
okay.
Yeah.
Because I was so calm, I was so relaxed in that particular consult, because I knew it could either go 2 ways. It could be great news, it could be bad news. It was bad news, and it was, the chemo's not working, the cancer's growing, there's nothing else we can do for you. He was up front. And I was like, okay, what can we do? So the guys just told me there's nothing else we can do. And I'm like, so what can we do?
Yeah, there must be an alternative, yeah.
And I was lucky because of the biology of my cancer. I've got something called Lynch syndrome, which is a genetic mutation. And people with Lynch syndrome are high risk of developing bowel cancer. And women, there's the additional gynecological cancers. Because I've got Lynch syndrome, there was a new kind of treatment called immunotherapy that works really well. My oncologist told me about that.
Oh, okay, so that's how you discovered it.
Yeah, he said, there is immunotherapy, but the problem is it's not on the NHS. So he said, we'll put in a funding request for it, but we'll also forward you to a research centre with a view to get you on a clinical trial.
Okay.
So that was when I was looking at immunotherapy for the first time, because previously I had no idea what it was, how it worked. So I left that consult with a bit of hope. But the challenge was, how do we get it? And so January, February, March, it was waiting for a decision on the funding.
Are you still going through treatment during this period, or
No.
you completely stopped the chemo?
There was no treatment. So the cancer left unattended would carry on growing.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So I kept chasing up the research place for immunotherapy. They couldn't offer me that because to qualify for a research trial, you need to meet certain objectives, and the trials were looking for new patients with no treatment. Exactly. But they could offer me a different trial, which wasn't immunotherapy. They were like, let's put you on this while we wait. But I carried on growing. Cancer carried on growing regardless. So they took me off that straight away because they did a scan at the start, and then 8 weeks later did another scan. Didn't have any impact. The NHS said no. 3 months later, and the trials were saying no, and the drug companies also said no. So
have you put through requests to these guys?
Yes.
All the time, yeah.
Yeah.
So they know that this treatment can potentially save your life and help you, and you're putting through applications, and they just sort of kind of knocking it all back. Saying,
Absolutely. Yeah. The NHS said they just said it's not something they're gonna even look at.
Oh wow.
They said it's not an individual treatment request. There's a cohort of people with your similar.
Oh, okay.
So we're not even going to look at it. The drug companies, they call it compassionate use requests. We put in those applications and they came back negative, and they said the drug is on the market. If you can fund it, you can have access to it.
Yeah.
But then the problem was, when I asked about funding, I was told you need to be a millionaire.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
At one point I was told each session, each cycle can cost 20,000.
And how many cycles would one need?
Probably 1 a month, or 2 a month. Like, this was when I was doing the research, and so 20,000 every month. You do the maths.
Yeah.
For a year or 2 years, it was just like, crazy numbers we're talking. But a friend of mine said, let's fundraise. And I was in no place to do that. I'm like, what do you mean fundraise? And his name's Rue, and he wasn't taking no for an answer. So it was like, let's meet up. And I said to him, I'll fundraise for a cause, a good cause in my name. And he said, no, I care about you.
Wait, so let me clarify this. So at this moment in time, you're willing to fundraise for others, but not directly for your own treatment.
I've always wanted to help people and kids. I have an affinity for orphans and or street kids, and I said, let's raise money for kids. And he was like, no, I care about you. If we can save you, your vision gets bigger.
Yeah.
And that got me really thinking about fundraising for myself, because I was in no place to do so, because asking for money is hard. Asking money for yourself is even harder. And so I had to get myself into a place to do so. So, you know, earlier we were talking about mindset.
Yeah.
At this point, I was at the lowest. I wouldn't even go out. I stopped communicating with people. I had cancelled appointments, and I just like sitting at home in my, like, with not even changing or showering or shaving. It was just, I didn't even know what I was watching on TV, you know, like proper depressive state. That's how bad it was. But then I had to find a way to...
Had you given up at this stage? You thought, I mean, there's nothing else you can do. You've kind of been served your death sentence, and the only way out of it is if you had all these funds to...
it was... I'd almost lost hope. Because, you know, in terms of numbers, we were looking at around 200,000.
Wow.
And I was in no place to go out and beg for my life. I just wasn't ready for it. I had, from a spiritual perspective, from an Islamic background, I spoke to an imam, and I asked what his opinion was, and he said, you have a duty to seek treatment.
Yeah.
The teachings of Prophet Muhammad was, you know, you go out there and find treatment.
Yeah.
And so he said, if there's a drug out there that's showing promise, that's showing hope,
you have a duty to find it.
So I had my friend saying, look, let's go out and fundraise. I had my family ready to help. Everyone was ready, but it all depended on me saying, let's do this.
Because you have to forefront it, wouldn't you?
Yeah. But what happened was, I was going through my calendar, and on my phone a notification popped up. An appointment with Roberta, a friend of mine who was coming over from Brazil.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, I might never see her again. And that's real. Like, the cancer's growing. I may never see her again because she lives in Brazil and she was just coming over. So I made an effort. I had a shower, I had a shave, and I went out to meet her. And then while I'm meeting her, one of my other friends, David, who lived in Dubai at the time, made a detour because he was coming to England going north. And because Roberta was coming to London to meet with me, he thought he would join us. I had no idea at this point.
And they know what you were going through at this point?
Yeah, they knew exactly what I was going through. And we connected at uni. And all three of us together, we'd only previously met once probably in the last 10 years. We'd met independently. And so that day just really changed things. When Dave joined us, I was like, wow. And I just remembered all the little things again, you know, like one day at a time. And initially when cancer came, I began noticing all those little things, and going through my darkest moments, I'd forgotten those. And that kindness was there. And so I just tapped into that.
So you were saying when you met your friends, that kind of rejuvenated and it kind of reboosted your energy in terms of like you getting out there and
it just reminded me, like,
going.
Just reminded me of how much love out there is. And then the next day, my previous personal trainer Ali got in touch and said, Mo, do you want to meet? And I was like, yeah, why not? And he treated me to pizza.
Yeah.
When I was training, pizza was not on the menu.
It was a no-go, yeah.
But here he was, and then he was like, "Do you want to step into the gym?" And he took me to the old gym, and they'd redone it. There was a song playing, Bastille, Pompeii.
Okay, yeah.
And I saw people working out. There were new machines, and I was like, that feel good, those feel good feelings you get. And going to the gym, I would get those. And the music was playing, and I'm like, Ali, I'm going to step onto one of these treadmills one day soon. And then the next day, I met up with Rue in his house, and a couple of other friends were there, and we were like, let's look at this fundraising. How are we going to do this? And it was at that point I said, let's do this. And there was an elephant in the room when I said, we need 200,000.
Well, at this moment, you haven't. Did they know the amount that you required for the treatment? Or you kind of kept that?
I told them in that session, in that meeting, they were like, so how much do we need? And 200,000, and you could hear a pin drop. Well, that's how I recall it.
It's a large sum of money. Yeah.
It was a case of, do we raise 50,000 first, or chunk it down, or do we go for the whole lot? There's just 4 or 5 of us. How do we raise this money? And it was kind of like, let's just put it out there and do the best we possibly can. And at that stage, there were like spreadsheets, different people to contact, different organizations. We needed a campaign name. What was
the campaign name?
So we came up with different ideas, and the one that stuck was Keeping Hope.
Oh, okay, amazing.
Because that's literally what it was.
Is it still running right now, the campaign?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
It was Keeping Hope, and then Keeping Hope for Mo. Because that's all we had was hope. And there were a number of action steps from that day, like set up a Just Giving page, set up a Facebook page, make a list of people to contact, all those kind of things. And I did it.
Yeah, amazing.
And then it was nerve-wracking. Probably one of the scariest things I've ever had to do was...
You're kind of putting yourself out there, innit, at that particular time. Yeah, kind of making yourself vulnerable to the world and telling your story to perhaps people that you're trying to hold it from initially. So I can imagine how that feels like.
Yeah, I mean, people already knew about my cancer. I wasn't secret about the cancer, but it's a new level of, I'm dying here and I need your help. And I had to get myself into the space of accepting that help, of receiving that, of asking for it, because during the cancer I asked for different kinds of help. Can you take me shopping, or can you take me for my appointment, or can you come and meet me, as opposed to me going out? But this was asking for money. And I remember it was a Wednesday morning. Everything was ready, and I just had to go live.
Press that button.
Press the button on Just Giving, because they have to vet it. They have to make sure it's a legitimate whatever. I don't know how they did that back then. I went live, and then likewise on Facebook, because not a lot of people knew I was about to do this. My inner circle, if you like, did, my friends and family, and they were like ready, just let us know when. And then I went live, and then it was just what happened next just completely still feels like a blur. I haven't fully absorbed it.
And how much was you able to raise, and what was the time frame for that?
So the target was 200,000. We raised 60,000 within the first month.
Amazing.
And we raised 100,000 within the second month.
Wow.
We had it, and that was enough to begin the treatment. And so that's what we did. We began the treatment while the fundraising carried on. So in total, we raised 190. Wow. 190,000 pounds. And I had a year of the medication. And we saw the benefit within the first 3 months, where the tumours reduced and stabilised. and that was the first time in a long time where the scan results were good, because previously it's growing.
And did you feel the physical changes as well through the treatment? Yeah.
Initially, there was a boost in energy.
Oh, okay.
I began driving again. I began going to the gym again.
Oh, amazing. After how long though? After how many treatments was this?
So it was a cycle every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I had 4 sessions. Yeah. So within 3 or 4 sessions, I was back. I said to my trainer Ali, I'm going to go back on these
treadmill. Yeah.
And I was on there, and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
I had that boost in energy. The tumors were reducing, and I was out there campaigning. I was being invited to give talks, and it was just a surreal period, because I was being stopped in the streets.
Oh, people recognizing you.
Yeah, like in my local area, people were stopping me. Even places that weren't local to me, like East London, but my campaign had spread in the community, and so I was in East London, and are you the brother with cancer?
Yeah,
and
that's the way of putting it.
The way people asked was different. Are you the guy with cancer?
Yeah.
Are you the guy fundraising?
Yeah.
Probably one of the sweetest was. I took my nephew I picked him up one day after school and took him to the playground because the sun was out, and another school kid in a school uniform cycling stops, and his way of asking was, are you the person who's ill?
Oh.
And I'm like, and he was probably year 7 or year 8.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's me. And he was like, I've been waiting to bump into you.
Oh, wow.
Because I want to know how you're doing, and also to have a selfie.
No way, so celebrity now.
He got out a phone and took a picture, and I'm like, I was just so touched that people not only donate and shared my story, but they actually follow up and want to know how I'm doing.
It's actually amazing you're telling the story in relations to how people reacted to you, particularly when you had cancer, and also how the community reacted in relations to helping you out and giving their money and their time and support and well wishes. Because nowadays we live in a world whereby everyone always under the assumption that everyone is evil, everyone outside of their box is evil, but there is a humanitarian and a human side to it, that when people are down and out, people are willing to help. People are genuinely willing to help.
Absolutely. And, it brings tears to my eyes. Like, the stories just so polarized. Like, my local pharmacy, they had a collection box. I didn't know about it. Lots of places were doing collections for me. And then one day I go in to give them an update in terms of how my scans are, and they had an update for me. They said there was a homeless woman who walked in, who either wanted painkillers or money for a cup of coffee, or I don't know what it was. And she read my story on the counter because, I had posters and flyers and leaflets, all that kind of stuff, and they had it on their counter. And she read it, put her hands in her pockets, and left a few coins on the desk.
That's amazing.
And the pharmacist said, you keep your coins, I'll put that in the box for you. But the woman said, no, it has to be my coins. And I'm hearing this story and not know what to make of it. I don't know her name, I don't know what she looks like, I don't know who she is, and she has no idea who I am. And someone I would have judged to have nothing just gave whatever she had that day. And just kind of overwhelmed, stories like that. And complete strangers in another part of the world. Another story, New Zealand. I woke up, it was August. I started my campaign in April, end of April 2016. August, I get a message on Facebook saying, "Hi Mo, my name's Alex. Me and my girlfriend Stephanie are you know, we saw your story and we want to help. We're going to do a 50-day cycle ride from the south of New Zealand to the very north.
Yeah.
And initially I'm like, why would you do this?
You don't even know me.
Who are you?
Yeah.
And we exchanged messages, and
Did they raise money for?
They raised almost £5,000.
Amazing. Yeah.
And like the stories are just like another story. The daughter of another, because I was being invited to talk at events and mosques and community events. The daughter of a guy I met at a mosque, she decided to raise money at her Saturday school. So she'd go in and raise money, and they came and dropped that off to me.
Yeah.
And I think it was a couple of £100. And like, so from kids to random people in New Zealand who are now friends.
Yeah.
They're back in England, and I've met up with Alex.
You actually met him?
I met him twice. We went to a football match together, Tottenham Chelsea.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so what you were saying, we see all the stuff in the news where, you know, there's a lot of hate and crime, and people seem not to care in this Brexit climate.
Yeah.
You know, 2016, the word Brexit hadn't been coined.
I know. Yeah. I was just waiting.
Yeah. And here, through my story, there are hundreds, thousands of people who I don't even know, who want to be part of my story, whether that's sharing my story or whether that's donating, and I feel a sense of responsibility. Like, I'm blessed that I've had this support, that there was a treatment that I could access, because there's no guarantees that the medication would work.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a leap of faith in my story, that, you know, we don't know if this drug is going to work or not. There was a good chance it would.
Yeah.
That's why my
and that was so to cut you off. So the chance that it would work, was that strictly based on the particular cancer it was in your own personal biology? Yeah?
Exactly. Yeah. The genetics were good. There was a 70 to 80% response rate for this medication for my biology.
So it's not a medication that just anyone with cancer can take. Yeah, it just depends on the form of cancer, because it varies. There's so many different forms of cancer. Everyone's body functions in a different type of way. So
it's
all like a perfect match. Yeah.
Spot on. You know, there are like 200 types, 4 different stages, different grades. Throw in the person's biology, their environment, all that kind of stuff makes a difference. And so, where they've done the studies on my kind, it's a 70 to 80% response rate. Yeah. And so it was an overwhelming support from my oncologists. I didn't stop at one oncologist. I got a second opinion. I called up doctors in America. I tried to find as much information. I read the research papers as well. I think it was the Boston Medical Journal.
Yeah.
And as the data suggests, I responded well to it. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. You mentioned that with the overwhelming compassion from strangers and people across the whole world, you felt a sense of responsibility, and you felt a sense of having to now give back. Is that where the book comes from, choosing to stay?
Yeah. So I felt there's a book in me for about 10 years now.
Okay.
But I didn't feel it was going to be this book, because initially I was working with young people in personal development, trying to help them become leaders or change agents in a university setting. Yeah. So the book I thought I was going to write was going to be aimed at students. And so when cancer came along, I've always liked writing. I was blogging. So I always thought there was going to be a book in me. I didn't quite know what that book was going to be. I wanted to help people use I wanted to give back to the cancer community using my story, and I wasn't quite sure how to do so. So the book came in at that point. I think it was it was 2016,
Okay.
shortly after I began fundraising. My story had got out there. So many people got in touch. I had a number of media opportunities, from local media to national media, TV, TEDx, TEDx
where I discovered
Kingston,
you from,
where you discovered me.
Yeah.
So writing a book felt natural. And I was still figuring out how I wanted to get the story out there, because I wasn't sure how the book was going to end, because I'm going through treatment at this point. And there was no guarantees how long I was going to live, and so the book was kind of like in twofold. One, I want to tell my story, and two, it was kind of like for my nephews, because they're young, and I had no idea how long I was going to live for. So I wanted to document as much of my story as possible, so they could read my story later on in life and get a feel for who their uncle was. Yet at the same time, have my story out there be relevant to other people going through not necessarily a cancer challenge, but a life challenge. Because, you know, my book, I'll pick it
of course,
and, you know, get a spiel into the camera.
I'm not going to put all the details in relation to the book in the descriptions anyway.
It's called Choosing to Stay, How Cancer Gave Me My Life Back. And it's in two parts, where the first part, I document all the choices I made. And I tell my story through those choices, because even though it's a stage 4 diagnosis, and even though at one point it was terminal, I always had a choice in how I respond on a day-to-day basis. And if I had no choice, it feels like there's no freedom. And so I want to get across in the book that no matter your pain, no matter the suffering, in the moment there's a choice in how you respond and how you live with that information.
And that's in relation to anything in life, really.
Absolutely. And so I try to get that across, because I was lucky with that the treatment worked. There's a chance it wouldn't have worked. But my choice was, I'm going to do the best I possibly can and go out there and try to raise the money. And there was a chance that we weren't going to raise nowhere near enough, because you know, the two polarities: one, someone comes in and says, here's 200,000, or you don't raise anything.
Get a couple of pounds from a couple of people and then that's it.
I knew my family would chip in. we might raise a few £100. But the choice was to go out there and do the best I possibly can, and through that raise awareness, maybe to share the story.
When you talk about awareness, what is it you're trying to raise awareness to? Is that the fight to keep going, or is that the actual medical medical issue itself? So
you know, when you go through a cancer story, you pick up on certain nuances, and you've mentioned the fight, and it's not a word that everyone feels comfortable with, because you know how it's reported in the media and headlines when someone dies of cancer. Often, most times, you'll read, this person has lost the battle, lost the fight, but it's not a fight in those kind of terms. There are fights along the way, like, you know, fight to get access to the drug, you know, the NHS, the drug companies, you know, there's a campaign wanting to get drugs accessible, not only for cancer patients, but for other illnesses, where a drug company just puts the price up.
That is ridiculous.
You hear of those stories all the time. So, you know, there are fights, if you like, on those fronts, and in day-to-day is a struggle. So I just thought I'd share that in terms of, you know, it's not always necessarily that language can play, isn't always
What language would you use?
What language would I use? So
instead of a fight, so if you would have had the news articles or the publications remove the word fight. So if someone passes away from cancer, how would we? Yeah,
just that
passes away. Yeah, person
has died.
Has died. Because a death is a death, isn't it? Yeah. There's one interesting thing that you mentioned, and that I would just like to touch on. So, whenever you're given sort of the death sentence, and they always tend to say, okay, it's terminal. So when they say it's terminal, but in your case, they said it was terminal, but it wasn't terminal. So are they terminating it based on your ability to afford a treatment that can potentially keep you alive? That is something I find slightly unsettling, because people are getting handed these supposed death sentences when there are potential treatments out there. So is that a case of lack of funding, or what is it that causes this?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Because when you look up the technical definition of terminal, there's no other treatment available.
Yeah.
I think that's what I saw when I Googled terminal cancer. There's no other treatment. Now, with a stage 4 diagnosis, there are some drugs like chemo that can help manage the cancer. So they call it disease management. As long as the cancer works, your cancer's under control. We can put you on cancer, and then, we can put you on chemo, and then we can give you a break. But it's maintenance. It's a maintenance drug. So it's terminal in the sense your cancer's not going to go away, but as long as the medication is working, we can extend your life, right? But then there's terminal in the sense there's no other drugs available to even maintain your life. And then the conversations will be around palliative care. Now, for me, I was in a situation where there's a drug out there, but we can't give it to you because of the money. Because the NHS hasn't approved it for use. Now, for a drug to get NHS approval, it needs to go through a number of procedures. Now, immunotherapy is the modality of the drug that I had. It's still in its infancy in drug development. Now, for a drug to be developed, it can take over 10 years.
Well, what's the success rate of the drug, though, and the treatment? For
my kind of cancer?
Yeah.
You're looking at 70 to 80%.
Yeah. That should be high enough for it to be approved, shouldn't it? Considering...
so for a drug to get approved, it needs to go through 4 phases. Initially, it will be tested in labs on animals and animal testing maybe. And then at first phase 1 would be humans for the first time. And then phase 2, if it's shown to work on humans, what the correct dosage is. And then testing, further testing. And then they do a calculation in terms of the cost benefit. What the cost of the drug is to the value in terms of how many months addition it gives to a certain person's life, and they will need to make those.
Is it worth them spending 200,000 to add 2 months onto someone's life? To put it raw.
Yes, the price on life. What is that? And so they need to look at a certain number of data for that. And you're a data analyst, right? They need to look into it. And if the data isn't there, they won't make... Now, my oncologists who see the data with the trials are like, it's a no-brainer. We know it works for these patient population. Give them the drug. Like, that's from an oncology perspective. Yet from the funding, it's a game. The drug companies need to make as much money as they can from the investment that they put in. It could be $1 billion to develop a drug, and then out of 100 drugs, maybe 5% make it.
Yeah.
So they need to offset the costs for the other 90% that
Such
don't.
a tricky game.
And then it's the politics, because a drug available in America, a drug available in the UK, a drug available in China. So the drug company will target different markets and will have different pricing strategies. And so it's a different machine. So China are developing, I say China, companies based in China are developing immunotherapies. So the drug I've got is an American company. Now, for them to enter the Chinese market, to undercut the other market, they will offer it at a discount.
Yeah.
And so it's horrible, because there I am, someone who can benefit from this drug, and I'm not the only one. There are many others out there in a similar situation. And we're like pawns in this game.
Yeah.
And
and that's the terrible aspect of the whole pharmaceutical and drug industry.
Yeah,
because there's more to it than just saving lives, is it? There's politics, there's a mega business behind it, which is near enough an uncontrollable machine. So we're kind of like, we're kind of the pawns in the whole game, in a sense.
And I don't want to knock the pharmaceutical industry, because it's not clear cut. I've met people who work in pharma, and they're some of the nicest people around in terms of they work on drug safety, they work on making, like, they dedicate their lives in drug development to save people's lives. And they have no say in the pricing. That's on a marketing level, that's on a CEO board level, in terms of trying to make those. So people in pharma might take offense, and that's not what I'm trying to do.
Fair enough,
and you know, the scientists and the doctors who dedicate their lives, they want these drugs to go out there to patients for benefit. And so
I mean, I've always been under the thought that the people on the ground actually making the medicine, they're in it for the good.
Absolutely.
They have to be in it for the good in order for them to want to get into that line of work and be doing research for God knows how many years they do in order to lengthen human life, in order to heal people. But then with most things, there comes the business aspects of things as well, where money has to be made. So on the corporate side, it's like, there's a battle between not good and evil as such, but there's a battle that's going on whereby the business side needs to make sense, and then the guys on the medical end are also trying to develop stuff to better and enhance human experience. So it's such a tricky field to be in, and the field to look at. Can I ask a personal question? So when you were going through the treatment and you were diagnosed with cancer and so forth, did you think about death, and what was your relationship with the idea of death?
So right from the start, and I don't think there's a day that goes by that I've not thought about death. You know, when my head hits the pillow each day at night, I don't know if I'm going to wake up the next morning. So that's a real life, daily conversation in my head. I felt close to death, emotionally charged in the early stages of the diagnosis, because, you know, stage 4, the chances are slim. And so I do get comforted by, you know, certain quotes and certain literature out there. One is by Rumi, which I remind myself a lot. His words were, "When I die to the body, I shall soar with the angels, and when I die to the angels, what I shall become, you can't imagine."
Amazing.
And when I read that, for the first time, I felt goosebumps. And so I remind myself, you know, like, I might die to the body, but that's not the end of me. You know, my soul, you know, I don't know what will happen to me, but I believe, you know, the soul lives on. And, you know, death also kind of, the idea of dying is real.
Yeah.
You know, like, I know there are people out there working on some top secret,
trying to stay alive forever.
You know,
apparently all the mega billionaires are kind of working on where they're doing a lot of like blood transfusion and all these weird like conspiracy theories out there that they're just trying to live forever.
Yeah, you know, so you hear of, you know, people are working on it, but so far, you know, death is something that will happen to all of us.
Yeah.
I don't think they've found a way to keep the human body alive. But it's one of those things where it stops you from wasting time.
Yeah.
And so, you know, writing the book, it was a case of, I don't know, I might die, so let me try and get this book done and make the best effort possible. But it also in touch with, you know, life is short. You don't know what's going to happen, and whether you've got an illness or you don't, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so that idea, you know, I write in my book, I may have breathed closer to death than ever before, but I've not felt more alive than ever before either. And so it's kind of like a paradox.
Yeah, does the idea of being close to death then makes you appreciate and live life more to the fullest, because you know there's something that you could have potentially lost?
Yeah, I mean, at times it's scary. Initially it freaked me out. The idea that I'm here right now in this world, and I know friends, family, different people who know me, and then I might die, yet all these people will carry on living without me here. And that idea kind of freaked me out initially. But the more I carry on living, the more it's a case of, you know, I don't know. Previously, I'd have 10-year plans.
Yeah.
You know, like at work, you have a 5-year strategy, and you might have a personal plan. By the time I'm 40, I want a family, I want a house, I want this, I want that. But that goes out the window for me now. This year, 2019, was probably the first time in my life I had no goals.
Wow.
Even with cancer, I had short-term goals in terms of get through chemo, get through surgery, raise money, you know, write a book even. But 2019, it was a case of I have no goals for the year.
Wow.
And it's just like real short-term scan to scan. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's just like...
No, I completely get it. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a sense of urgency about if there's something important to say or do, have those conversations, have those, you know, just make time to do those things that are important.
And it's actually one of the reasons why I wanted you on here as well, because I feel like one of the things that we tend to leave out is that when we're alive and when we're healthy, we tend to not be grateful for the things that we have around us. We tend to not have the motivation and the push to try and achieve things that we set out to achieve. But the moment that a spanner is thrown into the works, for instance, then as you said, there's a kick in the backside, and then we have that urgency to then go ahead and fight for what we want. But ideally we should have that level of energy throughout in an ideal world, and those that do have it, without necessarily having to have a terminal illness, you tend to find yourself achieving more in doing so. So it should serve as a daily motivation that we should be like grateful, and we should be continuously like fueled up to do and achieve the things that we set out to achieve, because you potentially could have not written this book had it not been for what you had gone through. So but now you can finally say that you've achieved one of your major goals, and you've got a pretty model picture on there of you posing for the cover of your book, which is amazing in itself. So
a few people have said like, I could launch my modelling career.
You could have launched your modelling career for that, so that could have been another stepping stone. So one thing I was going to ask you as well is, so if it was one big lesson you would like people to take from your journey, what would that be?
Wow.
Just one big lesson.
One big lesson.
I know there's loads, but yeah.
One big lesson is there's so much love out there. that you don't need to be alone
Yeah.
in your pain. You don't need to be alone in your suffering. You can ask for help.
Amazing.
Because people want to help.
Yeah.
So the one lesson there is that there's so much love out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we should stop paying attention to, well, not paying attention to, but what I feel is that the negative always tends to have the larger voice, whether they're the minority or not. And most of the time they tend to be the minority, but because they have the larger voice, we tend to assume that everything else and anyone else is negative. When really and truly, humans are willing to help each other when called for. Yeah.
And I think, I don't know how much time we have, but
Yeah. We've got as much time as you like. Yeah.
I think just with cancer, in the past 4 years, I've had a lot of time I've spent alone with myself. And so one of the things I've distinguished is being alone is very different from being lonely.
Yeah.
And so although I said in my lesson you don't need to be alone, I guess the word is you don't need to be lonely in your pain and your suffering. And what being alone has allowed me to do is just ponder on different thoughts and different things that are going on in the world, and that negativity, I think it's primordial. We want to know what's negative out of a fear of wanting to be okay.
Yeah.
And so that negative emotion sells headlines, it sells stories, and so the news
That's how newspapers were established. Yeah.
It sells, unfortunately, and it sells on attention. So we turn on a news channel is a guaranteed way of feeling crap.
Yeah.
It's like if you want to feel crap right now, the best way is to turn on a news channel, because you're going to get angry at what a politician said or didn't say or didn't do, at crime or whatever it is. And so unfortunately these stories of love and of good, they'll be reduced to like a 5-minute segment at the end.
Yeah.
Here's a feel-good story. And I've been on ITV London News, and I've been on there twice now. And we do have these good stories on there, but not enough. Not enough.
Yeah, we definitely need more of that, and that's actually one of the aims of my podcast.
Amazing.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I'm doing this is to put informative, educational, and just good content out there that people can sort of feed from and try and enrich their own lives in essence. So we try not to focus too much on the bad end of the stuff, but and if we do focus on the bad end, it's about how someone overcame an adversity like yourself. So we need more of these stories to really realize that there's more good out there than there is bad, but because the focus and our eyes and our minds are so much into the negative, we kind of get overcome by it. We assume that the whole world is bad, and it's what's causing a lot of some of the political issues and strife that we're having in the world today, because we've been fed all of the bad stuff and all of the good stuff gets brushed to the side, which is not ideal and not what we should be focusing on as a primary source of information. How has this journey shaped you as a person? How do you think it shaped you? Has it changed you massively, or you've always been this individual?
I think it's helped me grow in ways of being more, what's the word? Like, be more confident. Yeah. And be more vocal. Yeah. And get out there. So previously I'd have ideas. Yeah. And I wouldn't know if I should share it or I shouldn't share it, and so I feel the fundraising is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Yeah. Harder than the cancer.
Oh wow. What was so hard about it though? Was it the fact that you had to put yourself out there?
It was scary. Yeah, it was a case of the goal or the target was enormous. Yeah. And I guess the worst thing that would have happened was we don't raise the money, the cancer spreads, and I die. Yeah. That was like a script that could have been one of the outcomes. But it was just scary in terms of, you know, putting yourself out there to the world and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because rejection hurts, whether it's, you know, for a job, relationship, I don't know what other forms, you know, like.
But this must be the ultimate rejection, though, because this is the rejection of your life and your potential to stay alive. So that must be really daunting in itself.
It was, but then going through it, you know, to be able to now put out other stuff and come on, you know, podcasts and be invited to give talks, whether it's 5 minutes or, you know, the longest talk I gave was 45 minutes. And so it shaped me to be more vocal and you know, be confident in doing so.
And I'm sure the feedback helps as well in regards to
absolutely
inspiring others as well. It helps boost that self-confidence to carry on. So what keeps you going? Like, what's the day-to-day motivation that keeps you going now?
Great question. It's learning all the time. I wake up and when you look at me, you won't know, but I still have a number of challenges on a physical plane, like arthritis and colitis, which I have no medication for at the moment. And
what's colitis, if you don't mind me asking?
It's so for surgery they took out most of my colon. I have a stoma, so which is a bag that collects my poo, but I have a chunk of rectum left, but that's not connected to any other organ. So after surgery I had no need to go to the toilet the old way or the usual way. But then after my immunotherapy stopped, all of a sudden I needed to go to the toilet, which was weird because
something you hadn't done for a while.
But how is that even physically possible? Because my waste comes out of a bag. There's nothing connected to the rectum. So colitis is where there's an inflammation and it starts producing waste like mucus and blood and liquid and the gory details. And so now every day I can talk about poo and colitis, and which isn't something you'd normally expect to have a conversation about. But that gives me challenges in terms of incontinence. So, you know, any moment now, where's your toilet, for example? I need to rush. And so, and the arthritis, the joints, you know, I'd heard of arthritis before, but I never knew how bad it can be, from opening a bottle to putting on my coat to taking a step. There've been times where I've been outside and my knees have just locked. Both knees have locked and I can't walk.
So you'd have to stand still for it.
Stand still or try to walk from my hip like a zombie, if you like. And so day-to-day motivation is kind of still take one day at a time and do the best I possibly can. So I have people who contact me for advice and help, and so I will do so. I write. I'm looking to set up my own podcast.
I'm willing to help. So know when you're
awesome. We'll take that help. And you know, I work as a supporter of different charities. So Bowel Cancer UK is one of those I do, you know, bits and pieces with. They had a December beard campaign. And I did a photo.
That, grow a beard or get rid of your beard?
Grow a beard. So they called me up, you know, like my modelling career. They called me in for a photo shoot, and I was like the face of December beard.
Oh, amazing!
And did some radio.
You had it longer than you have it now.
It's about the same size. But what month are we in now? March.
We're in March now.
April is Bowel Cancer Awareness Month. So I'll be doing a bunch of stuff for that.
Oh, amazing.
So a few videos of my own to just raise awareness. So yeah, like as I say, it's one day at a time, one scan at a time, and you know, to be of value with my knowledge and experience where I can.
Motivation in itself. Yeah. It's amazing because there's different types of motivation. Because obviously your motivation is the fact that you're staying alive, you're staying strong, and you're motivating others through your story. Because I mean, even taking the basic motivation for me, for instance, just on a day-to-day to be able to get up and set up my podcast becomes an issue. Yeah. So at the moment, I struggle with it in terms of like the self-motivation to get up there, to contact people, to do the research and to prepare myself for it. And what I do on a day-to-day now is I realize that I get really driven by videos. So I get really driven by other people's stories. So even watching your TED Talk, for instance, that roused me up to now be like, okay, I'm gonna do this now. Yep. So I wake up. So I realize that that's what works for me. That's my form of motivation. So I wake up every day trying to find other means to keep myself going. And if I don't find that daily juice, I kind of get a bit deflated because I tend to have so much in my diary planned. But then to get that push to get those things activated and done is really hard.
Yep.
Yeah, and I found my thing now. And my thing is watching other people's stories or watching other videos.
Amazing.
Motivational videos and so forth. Because I would have probably not contacted you had I not watched the video which was sent to me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's so much within each person, like what we can do, regardless of our struggles.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes listening to other people's stories to tap into a bit of our own.
Most definitely. And, because it's hard to self-motivate, especially on a day-to-day basis with all of what's going on around us within the world, and maybe it might be our employment, our family lives, and there's so much being thrown at us all the time. So to keep yourself motivated and happy and energized to keep going on I think it's an essential. So you need to find what your motivation, what your drive is, to keep yourself up and going. So I mean, it's fantastic that you found yours, and hopefully it continues to grow and you reach more people, and hopefully this podcast helps enhance your profile and other people discover your work and so forth. But what's next for you now? What you got up and coming? What you got planned?
What have I got planned? I think it's speaking. I want to get out there and share my story more.
Yeah.
And so kind of be a professional speaker.
Yeah.
If I could, I guess that's my next real big challenge, if you like. Is
Are you taking courses on that and stuff?
No, I'm not taking any courses.
Organically, yeah.
My previous life, personal development stuff, I did a few courses on speaking.
Oh, cool.
But since my whole cancer story came along, I've just got up and shared my story. And I want to do more of that. So it's that will be, if I'm lucky or blessed to stay alive for another year, and we catch up in a year's time,
definitely.
I guess I'd love to have a lot more talks available on YouTube, for example. Yeah. So you saw the TEDx one.
Yeah.
I don't know how many other ones you saw of me on a stage. I would love for there to be so many more. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Mo, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. I mean, I think your story is extremely inspirational and motivational, and I hope people can take something from it. Anyone who's experiencing the same thing or just going through something in life and they feel like they need a boost of motivation and energy, you truly are the guy for that. And I hope people go and check out your book. I'm going to put all the details and information below. I'll put all your socials down as well. So anyone that would like to meet you, anyone that would like to speak to you or have you speak to them, I'll definitely make sure that I'll put you in contact with them. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And as you said, hopefully in a year's time we can sit down and have another chat about the process and all your wonderful talks and all the wonderful work that you've been doing out there in the community as well. So Mo, it's a pleasure having you on here.
No, it's been an honour.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Anything else you'd like to say before we leave?
Yeah, let's hold that as an intention a year from now to reconnect.
No, definitely. Look forward to that, definitely.